The landscape of college football is constantly changing, and this move that the NCAA just approved will impact December recruiting for the rest, I guess, the near future. Let's not say the rest of history and be dramatic. Oh, yeah, it's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me, making Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off, and it will cut off, does not mean that the journey is over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. And these days, new potential hires can feel like a high-stake wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs is here to help you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions do apply. We wrap up today's episode with a look at a couple of very interesting SIAC quarterfinal matchups on the men's side. Prior to that, we look at Norfolk State women's basketball team who just knocked off Howard, got their get back, and it's a game I need to see for a third time. Prior to that, we look at early signing day because the NCAA has voted to move early signing day up from mid-December to right after Thanksgiving. Over the last month, I've heard this phrase 3 to 4 times, and it's crazy. Football really doesn't stop. I can't remember where I heard it from. It's been from a couple of different people. I know my sister was one of them. Just football doesn't stop. She said that during the combine. She's like, dang, football doesn't stop. And it just keeps playing. And then when I hear this is what I think of. Football doesn't stop. Because we're post-combine, we're pro days, pre-spring games, right? Spring practices started, but we're pre-spring game. This is a relative dead spot in college football, but football doesn't stop. And the NCAA has, the NCAA has voted to move early signing day from mid-December to late Thanksgiving or late November, right after Thanksgiving. We're going to look at how this does impact HBCUs because it's mostly a timeline thing. It's not really an approach or a mindset thing, but it's mostly a timeline. But in general, this decision will make early signing day essentially a high school thing. That's what I think of in my history of early signing day. To me, this is what early signing day will always supposed to be. It will always supposed to have been this, is you have the guy in high school who's a star athlete and he's going to be an early enrollee in the college. That's what I think of when I think early signing day. I think of early enrollees. But now as the transfer portal has come around, it's turned into, at least since covering this and paying attention to it, a lot of times it's what's the biggest transfer to come in this early signing period, in this early signing window. Like that's what the focus has been. But with this new rule change, you can't have anybody come in from a previous university because the early signing day will be right after Thanksgiving. It'll be in the month of November in the transfer portal window. So you can't even enter the transfer portal until early December. This year it happened, or last year rather, it happened to be December 4th. So when I say I don't think it's going to change the approach, let me kind of elaborate on that. So timeline, you're going to be able to be more patient. Technically, you have the same amount of time from the minute they enter the transfer portal until National Signing Day. But the thing about that is you no longer have that obstacle or that barrier, just have the event in the middle. that could disrupt some things. That is early signing day. Let me put it like this. December 4th rolls around. December 20th was early signing day in 2023. That's 16 days. In those 16 days, a lot of people are rushing to make sure that they get to their spot so that they can become early enrollees. So that's what they're trying to do. They want to be able to play in spring games. So you have a lot of players who December 4th rolls around. By the time December 20th is here, they already know where they're going and they're putting ink to paper. Like, that's the thing. And I think the one thing it allows you to do is maybe elongate your time. Maybe players are a little bit more patient because they understand they don't have to sign by December 20th. Matter of fact, they can't sign until February, but they can commit. Committing in December 8th and committing in January 14th, that's the same thing. What I believe you will see, this is what I do believe you'll see, is you'll see players enroll at a school prior to signing their letter of intent. That's what I think you'll see so that they can still play in spring games. Because if you're not enrolled in the school, you're not going to be able to play in the spring games. And I don't think they're just going to sit out a year. Like, it's different things. So I was actually talking to Coach Robinson about it, and this is something I probably need even more clarity about. But because there's a second transfer portal window, and some of those guys are able to play in spring practice because of whatever, and some of them aren't because they're still enrolled in their other school. That's why I need clarity to understand why some can and some can't. That's where I need my clarity at. But I think that's what you'll see. You'll see players who they come from Auburn, right? Think of a D. Davis who came from Auburn to Alabama State. If I'm not mistaken, I believe he was a early signing guy. Maybe he just goes ahead and enrolls at Alabama State instead of signing his letter of intent, and he does that in February. One other thing you don't have to worry about is if you're a Celebration Bowl member, right? Let's say FAMU and Howard this season. You don't have to worry about, I need to make sure I'm recruiting these guys while I'm preparing for my Celebration Bowl. It's no more split duty. Of course, you still want to get out there and get those guys December 4th. But if you're planning for the Celebration Bowl, you can be patient. There's nobody who's coming to steal your guy. I think the Celebration Bowl was December 15th or 13th. So you have a week, 5 days, something of the sort, to where that's the only time you have from the end of your season to the early signing day period. So I think it's so much better now. I enjoy that. I think it's going to get back to what it's supposed to be, which is players coming from high school being an early enrollee into college, skipping and foregoing on their last semester of high school. That's what I think this has always been about. That's what I think it always should be about. Like that, maybe I'm just old fashioned, right? Like I'm reaching an age where I'm super young, right? I'm super young, but I'm reaching an age where I just like, this is how I like it. Like this is stuck in my ways. This is how I was growing up. Well, I'm hitting that point where I'm not as malleable as I used to be, right? On just certain things. Like, man, this is how it was. This is how it needs to always be. Why you always trying to change this, that, and the third? I think I'm a little too young to be doing that, but I'm kind of hitting that point. And this is one of those things where I'm happy as getting back to what I thought it always should have been. High schoolers as early signees. You can get those transfer portal guys. I don't think that there's a way to track if this rule makes guys change their mind. I don't think it's a difference in approach. You still need to be aggressive when looking at these transfer portal players. I just think you have more time. And because players may not rush, you have more time to treat this like a real recruiting period, like you do with high schoolers, where you were some of these high school guys for 2 years, meeting in living rooms, talking to guys, forming real relationships, not 2-week relationships. So I think that December to February, 2.5, 3 months, or really just 2 months. Yeah, it's really just 2 months because it's the beginning of February, beginning of December. So that 2-month range, you can really form connections. And I think you'll see players not rush to make a decision as fast. That's what I believe. If anything, they'll probably try to make a decision prior to the beginning of the new semester, but that still gives you a month and a half until mid-January. So I think that's what you're going to see going forward. This is a big time change, and college football is consistently changing. You have to change with it, and we'll see how this impacts HBCUs a year from now, a little bit under a year from now. Now, as we push forward, speaking of an impactful moment, Norfolk State's women's basketball team knocked off Howard and they needed it. When I tell you they needed it, I think they're going to look back on this game and find it very important. And let's break down why, in addition to why I want to see this a third time as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Fire TV. And Fire TV is one of those things that you can get it in the regular television. You can get the Fire Stick, right? There's different ways to go about getting yourself a Fire TV. My girlfriend has a Fire TV. One of the best decisions. I love it. It's phenomenal. And one of the things that's new about Fire TV is you're also going to have the Fire TV channels. So yes, you can get a television to go ahead and watch the March Madness, to watch the opening weekend of baseball. You can get Fire TV for all of that. But then also Fire TV channels delivers a constant supply of your favorite sports shows, whether it's Locked On. We're on there. You can see me on the big screen. You can see March Madness highlights. You can see MLB highlights. You can get just all of these things at the same time. So cooking videos, whatever your cup of tea is outside of football or outside of sports or within sports, you can find all of that on the Fire TV. So if you haven't checked out all of the Fire TV channels, you should. I'm still trying to make sure I get to everyone and dedicate myself to it. In order to do that, though, and you want to learn more about it, you have to go to Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. That's Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On Sports Today. First of its kind, 24/7, all day, everyday sports network on YouTube. Go to Locked On Sports Today and subscribe. I've seen all I needed to see. I know exactly who I want to be in the finals of the MEAC women's basketball tournament. That is Norfolk State and Howard. I ain't never been quiet about telling y'all what I want to see. I like seeing good sports, good basketball, good football, good soccer, good baseball, good gymnastics, good track and field. I like seeing good athletics. And good athletics is Norfolk State versus Howard. Simple and plain. I'm recording this a little over 3 hours after that game went off. I don't need to sleep on it. I don't need to wait to see the opening round of the tournament. I know I want to watch this game as my season finale. I seen it as my regular season finale. I want it as my postseason finale. This was a phenomenal game. And all you would need to watch to know that, right? Maybe you don't want to go watch the whole game. I get it. I've been there. Just watch the fourth quarter. You watch the fourth quarter and you would want to see this game again. Matter of fact, you watch the fourth quarter, you might want to go start it over to the first. It's one of those type of games. It's one of those type of final 10 minutes where if you just checked in fourth quarter, pass the ball in. It was so intense. It felt like a big time game. It felt like a 1 seed versus a 2 seed. Doggone it. It felt like a conference championship game. That's what it felt like. And I wanted to actually be that. I spoke about this on yesterday's episode. And I spoke about how Norfolk State needed this game just as much as they wanted this game. The reasons that they wanted, I'll go over briefly. Maybe you're not an everydayer. You will be eventually. Norfolk State couldn't win. I already had the MEAC secured. Howard couldn't win it. They already had the 2 seed secured. They couldn't go any lower. Essentially, you could argue that neither one of these teams had anything to play for. That's if you're narrow-sided, in my opinion. But you could make that argument because you're only looking at the, not narrow-sided, but nearsighted. Let's say nearsighted. Because you ain't looking far enough. I'm looking farther. Looking at the MEAC tournament, they ain't got nothing to play for. Okay, that's fine. But Norfolk State did want to avenge a loss. The only loss that they had was to Howard. And, I was trying to see, all right, is Howard that kryptonite? Is that the team that Norfolk just can't get over? And for a while, it looked like that might have been the case. It looked like Howard was going to try to come back. But more than just wanting it, and I think they understood it. They needed it. They needed it, not just for mental warfare, not just for that, but they needed it because I believe that Norfolk State has the ability to be a 15, maybe a 14 seed. I do. I think that they had some impressive out-of-conference victories. I think they knocked off Wake Forest, if I'm not mistaken. They've been dominant in MEAC play, but that was the one blemish on their record. The one blemish on their record was that they lost to Howard. So, and they lost to Howard by like 13. So they probably won't be a 14 seed. They more than likely will be a 15 seed. But if they had lost this game, they would have been a 16 seed. And every time you go down, it just becomes significantly harder and harder. That's the reason I feel like HBCUs have such a bad track record in March Madness, because they're 16 seeds, and that's very difficult to do. It's very difficult to be a 16 seed and knock off a 1 seed. So that's why I felt like they needed it. When I say you're being nearsighted, you're probably only thinking about the MEAC tournament. I'm looking at the NCAA tournament. I'll say it once and I'll say it again. I don't mind looking ahead because I don't play the game. I can look ahead. I don't have to worry about them winning the MEAC tournament or me focusing on the MEAC tournament for them, because I don't play. That doesn't matter to me, right? I'm thinking if they do win the MEAC tournament, I'm not saying it's a conclusion and it's just, of course, going to happen. But if they do win the MEAC tournament, then I'm looking at what kind of seeding they could get in the NCAA tournament. So that's why I felt like they needed this game. But this was phenomenal action, right? I could view this game, when I'm saying I need to see it a third time, I could view it from the prism of just this game that happened tonight. I could view it from the scope of the entire season and what it means, right? Like, both of these things are applicable. So I think I will look at it from both of those ways. Like I said, you could watch the last 10 minutes. If you just tuned in for the fourth quarter and you're like, oh, I forgot this game was on. Let me try to check it out. You would be entertained enough to repeat every single word. You could write this. I could write this whole topic if I only watched the fourth quarter. Like, that's how entertaining this game was, but specifically that end of the game session. Let me tell you when I knew Norfolk State was going to win. I knew Norfolk State was going to come up victorious when a minute and a half was left. And they came up, and I think it was, let me make sure, it was Debria Clark. And she grabbed a rebound with a minute and a half left. It was only a 3-point lead at that time. So I understand a minute and a half, like, okay, what's so impressive about that? But it was a 3-point lead. That's one shot. One shot. And Howard was fighting back this whole time. But when Miss Clark grabbed that rebound, she grabbed it with a certain level of aggression. She grabbed it with a certain attitude that said, that's it. Now, I could use her rebound as a metaphor for not letting it slip through your hands. I could say this is metaphorical, or this is a metaphor for that. I could say, oh, the way that Debria Clark grabbed the rebound, it was a metaphor or a representation of not letting this opportunity slip through her hands. She had a strong grasp on it. I could do that. I could say is a metaphor for their ability to stay strong in the midst of chaos. I could, because Howard had a hand on it. She kind of ripped it away. Maybe got a little nudge, just a little nudge to get the person away. It was an attitude with it. It was an attitude with that rebound. But the truth is significantly less poetic than a metaphor. The truth is, at the beginning of the fourth quarter, every ball was bouncing Howard's way. At the beginning of the fourth quarter, every loose ball seemed to find its way to Howard. There was a point when the ball stood still. Essentially, it looked like it stood still on the rim and then fell off when a Howard player came out of nowhere, came from the sideline. I think she might have hit the ground after her shot attempt or something. I don't know. But it was two Norfolk State players underneath the basket, and the ball stayed still. And then right when it rolled off the rim, this Howard player came out of nowhere and kind of hit it and collected the rebound. It just felt like every single ball that could go the way of Howard went that way. And some of it was from little effort by Norfolk State. I felt like there was some lackadaisical moments in there. I did. But when Clark grabbed the rebound, I said, we putting that to bed. That's it. That was the difference. That was the difference right there. And the same thing happened. You seen Fields had a rebound just like that. And she had the same attitude, the same, I'm not letting this go. Those were moments to me where I saw the change in mentality. I'm not being poetic to talk about don't let this opportunity slip away. I'm not being poetic to talk about the Mr. Chaos. I thought those were nice, but that ain't the truth. That's not the truth. The truth is plain as day. They saw what the problem was early in the game, and they fixed it. And that mentality is the reason I knew that they were not going to let this game get away from them. That's how I knew it. And it was a fantastic game. Fantastic game. When you look at the season, they're the only team to knock off Norfolk State. Howard is the only team to do it. I can't call them the kryptonite, but they're the only team to do it. And this game was closer than any other victory that Norfolk State had. Norfolk State has played in, there's 3 games you want to highlight. 2 games that they won by single digits. They won this game by single digits, and they also won one against Coppin State by single digits. And then a 1 loss. That was against Howard. 2 of the 3 games I highlighted were against the Howard Bison. I need to see this game for a 3rd time. Point blank, period. I need it in my life right now. I wish I could just fast forward. I wish this was 2K where I could just fast forward and say, you know what? We're done with this. We're going to get to the conference finals, and we're going to watch Howard versus Norfolk State. I ain't going to make no bones about it. That's what I want to see. And I'll explore what else I want to see, which is in the SIAC quarterfinals as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. And go to linkedin.com/lockedoncollege if you need to fill a void on your small business. If you're a small business owner who is looking for new employees and you haven't taken a chance to go look at linkedin.com, I have to question if you're really serious to growing your business. The thing about LinkedIn, it is very high reward, but no risk. You can post your job for free. No money out your pocket. You can find the right people. They can let you look at the LinkedIn profile. They'll 800 million people, and you can view who is a right fit for your team, not just who has his resume, who is the right fit for your team. You think that teams go through and don't see who their best wide receiver could be? You don't think they go and they recruit every single year? You have to go in there, you have to recruit as well. So go to linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That is linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Be able to reach one of the 800 million people who are on LinkedIn on a daily basis at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. As wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day, making it all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. And today's SIAC quarterfinals have a pair of interesting matchups. It's a pair of interesting matchups because we're halfway done with the conference quarterfinals. We got 2 men's matchups, 2 women's matchups today. I only want to highlight the men's because they have some really interesting games for 2 completely separate reasons. Edward Waters versus Morehouse, and then Benedict College versus Tuskegee. And I want to first look at Edward Waters versus Morehouse. These 2 teams have played twice. And they split the matchups. So with that, with splitting the matchups, I want to see what's the truth. Now, I think Morehouse is clearly the better team because when you look at what happened the second time, Morehouse lost that first game by 1 point on a pair of free throws late in the fourth quarter, or in the second half, excuse me. They came back the next time and mollywopped Edward Waters. Like, it was a 23-point victory. They absolutely murked them. So you have that, and you would say, okay, Morehouse is the better team. They have the better record. They have the better seating. They have all of these things. Edward Waters is taking that long route, though. They played 2 opening round matchups compared to Morehouse, who's about to play their own game, or the first game. I don't know, man. I'm trying to sell it, but overall, it's just I think it's going to be much closer than 20 points, but I do think Morehouse wins it. We're not even going to try to sell it and hype it up to something it's not. Then you have Benedict versus Tuskegee, and that's a showdown of evenly matched teams. Technically, Tuskegee has the higher seeding because they're on the west side. But then you also have Benedict College, who they have a better record. They have 6 losses compared to Tuskegee's 8 losses, and they only played 1 time. Benedict smoked them. It wasn't close. It was like that second Morehouse Edward Waters game. But that's not the reason I really want to watch this. I want to watch it because this is one of the games I just want to see who won, because the winner gets to face Clark. And then that's where the intrigue comes in. So I'm interested to see Edward Waters versus Morehouse because I want to see which one of those regular season matchups is closer to the truth. But this one, I just want to see who wins, Benedict or Tuskegee, because then they get to play Clark. And the only time that Tuskegee played, Clark, Tuskegee won. Benedict College split the season series with Clark, but Benedict won the last matchup in the season finale. Clark just snuck by Savannah State. Like this is what I want to see. All right. And also, while we're speaking about that before we close out, because I just want to go very briefly on that. Clark versus Savannah State ended with a little bit of controversy, but not for what happened when the whistles were blowing. Not what happened in regulation. Clark hit a game-winning shot with about 6 seconds left. Savannah State didn't answer. Clark won. They snuck away with a 1-point victory. Cool. That's the end of that. But then you see Elijah Stewart flip off the crowd. 2 hands, Stone Cold style, bam, right? And then there was also trash that was being thrown. I don't know what came first, man. I'm assuming the middle fingers came first, but I know something came before that. Maybe it is because I don't think Elijah Stewart just turned around and was like, let me flip you off. Like, I don't think that happened. I think they was probably talking trash the whole time, and he reacted that way. Would I have wanted him to do that? No. Do I care that he did that? No. Like, neither one really phases me. But throwing trash on the court at a player is a problem, and that does phase me. So I'm not gonna get on my high horse and say, oh, well, you can't do this. I'm not gonna do that. I'm simply gonna say that I don't think that there's any excuse. I don't think there's any excuse for throwing trash on the court at a player. This whole situation should have been avoided, but to focus on the middle fingers and say some stuff, no. The trash being thrown is the biggest problem of all. I don't even think showing the middle fingers would have end up being a thing for real if trash didn't end up on the court. I don't think nobody really even cared. So that's just my personal opinion on it. But I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. When we come back somewhere in the week of action, we'll be looking at Tennessee State's new offensive coordinator. We'll look at some of the SIAC tournament action because I think it ends on Sunday, if not Monday. We'll look at SWAC completion, MEAC completion. We have a lot of things. The impact of Norfolk State versus Howard men's basketball game. That will be on Monday's episode. There's so many things to unpack. So we got to wait over the weekend. I appreciate you making this your first listen of the day every day. In the meantime, in between time, take care. Stay blessed. Peace.